Hey there, I'm Kat, and this is Brews and Reviews. So in today's video, I'm going to be doing a book talk about House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J Maas. This is the first book in the Crescent City series, and I'm sorry if I ever call this book Crescent City, but that is kind of ingrained in my mind because of this stupidly huge series title down here, whereas House of Earth and Blood is just barely even on the cover. They fixed it for book 2, but you know, it's still ingrained in my head as Crescent City. But please be assured that I do know this book is called House of Earth and Blood. So if you're looking for a spoiler-free review of this book, then please go and check out my previous video where I talk about some of the things that I liked, some of the things that I didn't like, and just the general synopsis. This video is going to be full of spoilers, so you are warned now that if you haven't read this book and you don't want to know any spoilers, please don't watch this video. Okay, so while you are leaving, if you need to leave, I'm gonna put this book down because it's heavy and my wrists are brittle and frail. So I'm assuming if you're still here, then you know the general story of the book, but maybe you read it a couple of years ago and you forgot what it's about. So I am gonna do like a rundown of the synopsis of the book. So I'm gonna give you guys what I affectionately named drunk retelling. I'm not drunk, it just sounds like I am when I do it. So stay with me if you want an update on events of things that happened in Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood. So we start off the book with Bryce Quinlan, a party girl, half human, half fae. She works for a magical artifact dealer who is vaguely scary and often threatens to turn her into some sort of small mammal. And she goes home and meets with her extremely powerful wolf shifter roommate, Danica Fendir. She's spending the night in with her pack and is kind of worried because someone she put in prison is being released soon. Bryce goes out on a date with a guy that's kind of a tool, so she dumps him and leaves. She goes out partying with her friends Juniper and Fury, and then when she goes home, she's really drunk and on some drugs. So when she walks into her house, she's like, smells weird. Oh, it's blood. She goes into her apartment and finds chunks of wolf pack all around the house. Freaks out a bit, hears something in the laundry chute, and then runs out to try and catch it. She's like barefoot, high on drugs, trying to find the thing that she thinks killed her best friend. So while she's out there, she catches a glimpse of it, she sees this thing nomming on an angel. She gets bitten by it, but it escapes, and she manages to save the angel and call the authorities, who then come and collect them. She's put into questioning where Hunt and a bunch of other angels are trying to figure out who the murderer is. She's having a moment of shock, so she's not really answering any questions, and then the Autumn King, who turns out to be her father, and Rundanan, who is the Prince of the Valbaran Fae, and her half-brother release her from questioning, so nobody comes to question her. She is obviously traumatized because her best friend and other friends have just been murdered in her apartment, and it's just a very nasty time. She's uninvited from the sailing, which is a funeral thing where they both can carry on going on to the dead place. I don't know, I forgot the name already. That's a bit terrible really, but let's continue. So then we have a time skip of nearly 2 years. Bryce is still working in the same job. She really wants to get out, but she can't really find anything. It doesn't really have any time. She's approached by the governor of Lunathian, who is Micah, the angel, and she's assigned to try and find out who Danica's murderer was, because the same creature that she chased has reappeared and murdered someone else. So she teams up with Hunt, who is a very powerful angel who was involved in a rebellion and now is a slave, can't use his full powers, and belongs to Micah. Hunt is trying to work off the 2,000 plus deaths that were caused by him and his unit back in the rebellion, and Micah's offered him a deal that if he can solve this murder, then his debts will be reduced to 10, so he will be able to get his freedom presumably much quicker. So Hunt's like, I'm really on this and I have to work with this fucking party girl. Great. Whereas Bryce is like, oh great, I just have to work with this brooding alpha hole who looks like he hates me and thinks that I am dirt. Super. So neither of them particularly like each other at the beginning, and Bryce has a very good time leading Hunt to believe that she's very vapid and everything that he just believes that she is. Now they start this investigation, they start looking into things. Meanwhile, Rundanan has also been tasked by the Autumn King, his father, to hunt down Luna's Horn, which is an artifact that is very powerful and has been missing for about 2 years, since the same week that Danica was murdered. He goes to see Bryce because she's in the antiquities business. They don't get along, they had a fight a while ago, and they yelled at each other a bit. So they don't really talk very much, and their relationship's very strained. So now everybody's kind of looking for Luna's Horn in the background, but we're more focused on trying to find Danica's murder. We go around the houses a bit, and Michael likes to exert random control over Hunt and sends him out to do a murder that kind of messes with Hunt. It makes him really depressed. There's this really nice scene with him in the shower, and Bryce comes in and comforts him and sort of takes care of him, and it's very cute. And it's probably like a step in their relationship that connects them together the most, because Bryce just knows what he needs and then he starts to understand her a little bit better. This is where my brain sort of tuned out because I think it went on a little bit too long, but essentially they were led to believe that Sabine, who is Danica's mother and leader of the wolf pack, who stood to gain a lot from Danica's death, they think that it was her, because Danica was stationed at the temple where the lunar horn was stolen from when it was stolen, and something weird happened with the footage. So then they accuse Sabine, and she's not very happy about being accused. There was also another incident where one of Sabine's pack members, Amelie, defaced some foods that Bryce bought to go and like honor Danica with on Danica's birthday, and Hunt went all and threatened to kill Amelie if she ever did anything like that again. So Sabine's not very happy, and she's like, right, I'm gonna go see Micah and complain about you. Anyway, Hunt gets his wings chopped off, which is not super, but they do grow back, because that happens in this world. If people who have made the drop get stuff chopped off, it just grows back, which is good in one sense, but also reduces the stakes so much and makes it really kind of hard to care if somebody gets something chopped off. So that's very sad. Hunt will heal though, and Bryce and him go back to their apartment, and they're like, actually, hang on, we like each other now, because they've sort of been growing to like each other throughout the book and becoming friends and more than friends, and they decide, let's give in, and then he hurts himself too much, so they never actually have sex, but they nearly do. She has a nice time at least. So yeah, they stop and they just chill. So the next day, Hunt's still resting, and Bryce gets some news that there is a drug deal going on, because all this time they've been searching for this Danica. He's been accused of being a drug dealer of this really crazy drug called synth, which makes humans really, really powerful, and it makes fae and other magical creatures go crazy and do like crazy things. So Tharian, who is like a spy master merman, kind of says, there's something going down on the river, you should come see. So Bryce goes to see. Oh no, it's Hunt. Hunt and two of his angel buds doing a deal with someone else trying to get the drugs. Then the other angels come down, Micah comes down, and they take Hunt into custody and stuff, and they're like, you all are traitors. And Hunt's like, no wait, I wasn't going to, I promise, I tried to call this off, I realized this was wrong. And Bryce is like, you traitor! And she gets really pissed and storms off, and Hunt gets taken away. So then we move into the territory of everything shit for everyone. So Bryce goes home, thinks about it, and she's like, actually, you know, I really do like Hunt. And she's like, I understand why he would do that. He's kind of a slave. Maybe I should go and try and stop him from having the worst time ever, because he was sold to this woman who just really likes to torture him. She's the sister of the woman that he loved and who led him into rebellion. So yeah, he really hates her, and she now owns him. So Bryce comes in, she offers to buy him, and this woman's like, no, of course not. I'm gonna have loads more fun with this guy than if I give him away. So then Bryce is like, take me instead. And then Rune's like, no, you can't have her. She belongs to us, as in the Fae. So Bryce is a bit sad, and Hunt's like, piss off, no, and tries to do anything to make her go away and reconsider her position. So that doesn't work, and Bryce gets really pissed. Meanwhile, the protective necklace that she has been wearing throughout the entire book gets burnt up because she tried to offer it to, I can't remember this woman's name, and I don't know why. I feel like it's Shahar or something like that. I should probably look it up, but I'm not gonna, because that would take too long. So when she's on her way home, she gets attacked by the demon that has been killing all of the people. Rune and Rune's friends manage to save her, and she goes and finds another necklace. So then everything sort of chills out for a second, because the main event is here. It's time for the summit, which is a giant meeting between all of the different factions of Crescent City. So you've got Fae, the witches who are about to crown a next witch queen, the Asteri, various other people from other houses, including Bryce's friend Fury, who is an assassin mercenary lady, and her boss. At this point in time, Bryce is just working a normal job with her fire sprite friend La Harbour, also another slave by the way, and her chimera Siren. So she's just working away, and then Micah turns up because he's taken a break from the summit to go visit Bryce. Now Bryce is like, oh, this is dangerous. So she texts her boss and she's like, help me. And there are a lot of cameras where she works because there's a lot of artifacts that are not to be messed with. Her boss is kind of hinted at being into dirty dealing, things that should be kept secret and away from all authority. So Bryce is like, okay, this is dangerous anyway. And Micah reveals that he is the bad guy. Oh no. He was actually the angel that she saved from being nommed on by the Crystallis demon back in part 1. And that's because he was looking for Luna's horn the whole time. He was trying to find a way to reforge it so that he could get this power and open gates to different worlds and potentially do all sorts of chaos things and be very, very powerful. Now, how do I know all this, you're wondering? Because Micah starts villain monologuing all the time, not realizing there's a bunch of cameras on, and Bryce's boss is like, hang on a second, everybody at the summit, maybe we should watch this. Puts it on a big screen. So all of the powerful people are watching what is happening with Bryce and Micah in this room. And they're watching as he admits that he drugged Danica and that made her go crazy and kill all of her friends. Yeah. And then he's like, I figured out where Danica hid the horn. She took it to protect everyone from me finding the horn. Turns out she ground it up, put it in tattoo ink, and tattooed it on Bryce's back. So now Bryce has the horn inside her and she is the horn. So Micah's like, hey, I'm gonna take that horn now. We'll see what happens if I drug you up. So he stabs her with a drug. She starts healing from all of the damage that is being done to her. And then he throws Syrinx, the Chimera, into this massive container of water where this creature called the Nock lives, and it's like water demon, bad, and eats things. So Bryce goes in to save Syrinx because of course she's going to. She has a self-sacrificing problem, and she dives down, she gets Syrinx out, the Nock almost kills her, she gets out again. Hooray! Meanwhile, she and Lahaba managed to lock Micah in a cupboard, but it looks like he's gonna get out. So they're trying to run away. Syrinx is injured and Bryce is trying to carry her Chimera out, and then Lahaba, the fighter sprite, is like, I'ma stay. Let me do this one thing. And Bryce is like, no, I freed you, I bought you, I saved you. And Lahaba's like, I know, but let me do this thing. So she sacrifices herself, and it's much tears because it's very sad. Bryce uses that time to run upstairs, grab this gun, and then when Micah appears, she shoots him in the head. And not only does she shoot him in the head, by the way, all of these other really powerful immortals are watching her do this, she then chops him up with Danica's sword, sets him on fire, grabs the Hoover, and hoovers him up. Oh, I love Bryce so much. Anyway, so she's done that, and she's like, cool, right. Well, that problem's solved. Killed Danica's murderer, great. Wanders outside and realizes that all the gates to the city are open and demons are spilling in, murdering everyone. So this is just a bad time for everyone. All of these powerful people are confined to the summit at this point in time, and Bryce, half-human Bryce, is just running around with Danica's sword like, oh my god, we need to save people! So she heads to the Asphodel Meadows to try and defend the humans, because they've got no one to look after them. All the immortals have got people looking after them and attempting to fight while people try and flee into these underground bunkers. And Bryce is like, no, we need to send somebody to go and save the humans. They've got no one protecting them. And one of the members of Sabine's wolf pack, who is the brother of one of her dead friends, he says he's gonna go. It's very emotional. He's like, I'm coming, we're gonna defend them. It's very cute. So lots of murder is happening at this point in time. Bryce is trying to defend people. She ends up getting locked out of the underground bunker, but she manages to save Ethan, and she feels good about that because she's like, I couldn't save Connor, but I could save Ethan. And it's like, oh, tears. Essentially, at this point in time, I was crying a lot, so it gets a little bit muddled in my head. Bryce manages to make it to one of the gates where she reveals that she is in fact Starborn. Now, being Starborn is a power that she has hidden from her father. She was supposed to have very little magic, and she lied about it because she actually has very powerful magic. So she uses the horn and her own power to close one of the gates. She's knackered though, she's not gonna make it anywhere else. And then the Asteri send in some like really powerful magical bombs and like bomb the place. And she manages to survive the first bombing, and she's like, oh, fuck. Now, meanwhile, the immortals are like, oh my god, we really need to, like, save her because she's potentially the only person that can do anything about this. So Fury's got a helicopter. I don't know how she has access to a helicopter, but she does. And she's like, right, we're gonna go to Bryce because she's alone. And the new queen of the witches manages to remove the restraint on Hunt so he could actually have full access to his lightning powers for the first time in the entire book. So that's nice. And then he promptly goes and murders the bitch that owned him. Rune, Hunt, Fury, and Amelie, I think it might have been a couple of other people too, they all take off in the helicopter to go and find Bryce. There's more bombs that are about to be dropped on Bryce's head. So Hunt jumps out of the helicopter and lands on top of Bryce to shield her from that. But he's dying, basically, because of that, and she's like, oh, shit, it's all gone to tit. So Bryce is in complete despair. Hunt is dying next to her. She's in a smouldering ruin. There are demons still pouring out of different gates and she doesn't know what to do. She puts his hand on this disc that is used to communicate to other parts of the city, and you can do that by pouring into a little bit of magic, and it sort of takes that magic from people because she needs an anchor because she's going to make the drop. So she is going to drop into her power so that she can use it to close all of the other gates. And having an anchor is really important because it's like a tether back to life. So when she reaches the bottom of her power, she can still get back out again. She only has a certain amount of time to do this, and she's like, I need somebody to be there, and there's no one there. And then she hears Danica's voice, because the little part of Danica that is still in Crescent City that survived her sailing is there to talk her through. So Bryce makes the jump with Danica, and you can probably tell right now I'm getting a bit emotional because I was in so many tears at this point in time. This is very, very stressful, very crying. She gets to the bottom and everyone's like, she's never gonna make it back up because she used Danica as an anchor, and Danica's dead. She's not really there. So Bryce keeps plunging down in the depths of her power. She's more powerful than Rune, she's more powerful than the Autumn King, and she reaches the bottom. She has a conversation with Danica. They talk about some stuff, it's very cathartic, and then Danica's like, run, you have to go. You have to go. So Bryce manages to get out. It's very, very emotional. She's very, very powerful. And in the whole time that she has been making the drop, she's closed all of the gates and repaired the entire city and Hunt. So everybody that's not dead already is good to go because Bryce expended so much power doing that. So she's now very powerful, and everybody knows that she's Starborn and is the Horns. So she has the power to open as many gates as she wants whenever she wants, and that's very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. But at least if, you know, she loses a limb or something, it will grow back now because she's made the drop and it's technically immortal. So then everyone's like, okay, well this is very sad because a bunch of people, just random civilians, have died. And the city's kind of in turmoil because 2 archangels have been killed in like the space of 2 hours. So everything's kind of up in the air. So Bryce and Hunt just go back to their apartment and they're like, okay, well we need to relax now. And then they have sex because that's just what happens. Bryce receives a phone call from the head of the Asteria. I can't remember his name. I feel like it's Regulus or something like that. Anyway, he's like, listen, great. It was really great that you shut those gates, but if you could just not do anything ever again, then, you know, I could just leave you alone. We could just pretend that you don't exist and you pretend that we don't exist and you could do nothing with your lives. And you know what we'll give you for that? We'll give you Hunt's freedom because he is freed. The tattoo on his wrist claiming him as a slave claims him as free. So now he's free. Hooray, that's very nice. But the cost is being absolutely quiet and staying in their own lane. So that is going to be an interesting turn into book 2. Now, that's the end of my synopsis. I know I definitely missed a bunch of stuff out of that, but this is a long book, and I hope you enjoyed my drunk retelling of Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood. If you're still here after all of that, then I salute you. Good to see you. Let's talk about some of my thoughts on things that happened. So I have my trusty book where I wrote down a bunch of notes of things that I wanted to talk about. So let's start off with the first 100 pages. A lot of people said that the first 100 pages of this book is basically impossible to understand and basically makes it really, really confusing. And I kind of wanted to just talk about that because personally I didn't find that those first 100 pages were extremely confusing. I think the problem with the first 100 pages is about the amount of info dumping. It kind of seems like every time a character is introduced, and there are a lot of characters that are introduced in part 1, it seems like we get their name, their status, and then like what they do. Take Rune Danan's introduction for example. Rune Danan, Crown Prince of the Valbaran Fae, son of the Autumn King and the current possessor of the Star Sword, fabled Darkblade of the ancient Starborn Fae, proof of the Prince's Chosen One status among the Fae, whatever the hell that meant. It talks about the sword for a little bit, and then it says Danan's blue eyes simmered like the heart of a flame. Though Rune himself had no such magic, fire magic was common among the Valbaran Fae, wielded by the Autumn King himself, but rumour claimed that Rune's magic was more like those of his kin who ruled the sacred Fae Isle of Avalon across the sea, power to summon shadows or mist that could not only veil the physical world but the mind as well, perhaps even telepathy. How much information do you want to give us in those 2 paragraphs of just meeting this one person? There's a lot of information to be given in just 2 paragraphs. That's an 800-page book. I really feel like a lot of this information could have been sprinkled throughout the story and it would have been much easier to digest. Perhaps that's just a me thing, but I feel like it really impacted the storytelling at the start of the book. Though I think because this is kind of more urban fantasy than it is fantasy, I would say that this world does require a little bit more explanation. I think the difference between this and Sarah J Maas's other books is that we usually follow a protagonist going to one place and we learn about people from one place and one situation at any one time. Whereas in this book, because it's such a mishmash of culture in the same place, you have to learn about, oh, this person is relevant because of this thing and important to this section of this place. I don't know, I can understand the info dumping, I just don't think it makes for the easiest read, and I think that is why a lot of people struggle with part 1. Moving on, I had an interesting time with Hunt and Bryce's relationship. I didn't love how he just decided that she was a party girl. He put her in the party girl box and he was like firmly believing that that's where she was and that's all she was. And I didn't really like that because be a tad bit more open-minded. I mean, it doesn't help that Bryce really enjoys leading him on and making him believe that that is who she is, like she does with a lot of people. But I did struggle with that at first because he says it a lot and he's like, oh well, she's just a party girl. That's all she is. And I got a bit annoyed with the repetitiveness of that. Speaking of repetitiveness, so many times Bryce is slut-shamed. She's called a whore and people ask if they can buy her all the time. And I know that's part of the structure because of where half-humans sit in the hierarchical ranking of Lunathian, but at the same time, it's so hard to read that like literally every person that she meets that is of a higher power status than her is like trying to grope her or like being like, hey, how much do you cost? And it's just a bit much. She's called a whore so many times in this book and I found that really hard to read, and I feel like you could have said that or implied that without it being every interaction that she has with a male ever. So I found that kind of a lot, and that was coupled with that mostly taking place in part 2 and a bit of part 3 where I was already kind of struggling because the pacing was much slower and like the story was much simpler, so I was kind of glad when that went away. I feel like the structure of having slaves is a really interesting one because everybody seems to be not happy about it, but at the same time they're like, well, can't do anything about it, that's just people are slaves. And then they work with these people or creatures who are slaves. Everyone seems to just be like, that's the status quo and that's where we go with it. And then you see throughout the book that people start to go, it's a bit dodgy really, isn't it? Being slaves? But it doesn't really seem to go anywhere. And I feel like it's definitely going to go somewhere in a future book because why wouldn't it? It really would be a shame if all of these characters just decided to leave that alone. Bit of a shit status quo really. I think the system of punishment for rebellion is really very harsh because it doesn't just punish the people who were involved in the rebellion, it can punish everybody. For instance, the sprites all seem to be slaves and I don't really understand why they specifically have been singled out. Was it like every single sprite was involved in that and then everyone was like, hang on a second, let's just enslave their whole race? I also thought it was interesting that these slaves were tattooed, and for some reason this reminded me of like Roman gladiators. I'm not sure why. This book has a lot of references to our mythology, so there's a lot of stuff from Greek, Roman, Norse and Egyptian mythology that I just noticed sprinkled throughout, and I feel like there's an interesting comparison. I'm just not sure where it's going with that, but I'm very intrigued to see if it has any impact on future things. So I want to talk a bit more about part 2. I personally think that part 2 was too slow, and I think that the story was too straightforward. It was the let's find out who killed Danica storyline, and I think it went on for too long. It went on from about page 94 to 330. Just cut out 100 pages of that and condense it a little bit, and I think it would have been much better. And I think part of the reason that felt so slow is because it didn't feel like it was the real story, and I don't know if this is just because I've read other Sarah J Maas books and I know more about the structure, but it just didn't feel like we'd gotten to the point yet. It felt like it was all a build-up to the point. And I feel like that was kind of proven right because part 3 and part 4 are way more interesting, and they do continue to be about the stuff that we've learned about Danica's murderer, but that there's so much else that's happening and so many bigger things that are happening all at once. I feel like we were too contained on this one storyline, and it just felt like it was kind of going to become irrelevant later, and it almost did. I don't know, this just part 2 for me was a little bit off, but part 3 and part 4 brought it back. I really loved them. I forgot to talk about Adis in my little retelling bit there, so I just want to say that I love him. I love the fact that he's obviously a demon from hell, and Hunt is like, what the fuck, Bryce? Why would you bring this guy here? She's like, oh, he's a bud. He's my friend. Because she met him when she visited the Oracle and he was a cat. I absolutely adore the fact that this demon just sometimes is a cat. And I don't need to know anything more about him at this point in time to actually love Adis. So I feel like he has to be more of a prominent character in book 2, but I absolutely adore him in book 1, and I don't care how little he was in the book. Speaking of people who I adore that were completely underutilized, Fury Axtar. I need to know more about her. I want to know, what is her job? Where does she go? What were the things that were fucked up about her? Because she's like, you have no idea, Bryce, what has been going on with me. So don't say that I've not been here for you because of that. I've had my own stuff going on. What stuff have you had going on, Fury? I need to know. I need to know more. I'm hoping for more stuff about her, but there are so many characters and so little time, and I just feel like she's going to run off again and we're never going to learn these things. So I will wait and see in the next book to see if we learn anything more about her. A moment that I really liked was when Bryce took care of Hunt after Hunt went and killed 3 guys really slowly and horribly, and he sort of locked himself in the shower and kept like scolding himself in the shower, because it was like the first moment that I actually cared about Hunt. I had a bit of a struggle caring about Hunt because I never felt like he was truly in danger, because, you know, things grow back, but I feel like you actually got to see more of his pain and his trauma and how he deals with it, and the way that he sort of shut off was really interesting to watch, especially when you combine it with Bryce coming in and like understanding her own pain and her own trauma, and she just took care of him, and it was just a really soft scene. I don't know how else to describe it. It felt soft to me, and I loved to see it, so I just really enjoyed that bit, even though it was sad. Now I want to talk briefly about the drug storyline, because I personally don't love storylines that involve drugs, especially in a world of magic, because I kind of feel like if you lived in a world of magic, like, why would you bother with the drugs? Like, why? I don't know. It makes no sense to me. Like, there's so much more interesting things out there. Why are you going to go on a Hive? I think the drug storyline was really interesting, and the way that it sort of cast doubt on Danica and made Bryce sort of rethink everything that she knew, because she didn't know certain things about Danica and she'd hidden stuff. And it was a little bit of a mindfuck, but it was really nice to see how that sort of resolved. But how that sort of resolved was Hunt on the boat trying to buy some of the drug, and I've got to say that's the dumbest plan. That sort of came out of nowhere for me, because I didn't expect that to be actually Hunt, and then when it was Hunt I was like, what? That's ridiculously dumb. So I just think the whole plan is dumb. But then again, I guess he's a slave and he's looking for any way out, because like it's very traumatic for him to have to be an assassin, and he doesn't like it obviously, and like fair play for that. But I just think the way he went around trying to work out that plan, it was just really dumb. It was not something that I would think a smart character would be doing, and I just didn't get the vibes that Hunt would be that dumb, but he is apparently so. And you might say it's because they had to get back to the storyline where Hunt was away from Bryce and he was being taken away and separate the two of them, but I feel like there could have been a less clunky way to do that. I'm sorry, I just don't believe that he went there, and the betrayal never really seemed to mean anything to Bryce, so I just don't see why it had to happen. There could have been an easier way to do that. It would have been more impactful. It just didn't work for me. Anyway, I feel like that could have been an opportunity to have Sandriel be more evil. We hear a lot about her being evil and a lot about the things that she's done to Hunt previously, and I just don't think we get to see it in the book, so I think I would have preferred to see her do something evil instead of just being touted as this like evil threat. Now I briefly want to comment on Bryce's self-sacrificial nature, because she's doing it left, right and centre in this book. She's like, I'm going to throw away my afterlife so that Danica definitely gets across in the sailing. I'm going to get into massive debt just to save this chimera from being sent to a nasty place. I'm going to literally sell myself in exchange for Hunt to stop him from being taken away by Sandriel, and then later on she pushes Ethan into the underground bunker to save him from that, and then later on she's just like going around being like, okay, I'll make the drop to save everyone and die. Bryce, stop that! You are worth things, woman! It frustrates me because I love her as a character, but I'm like, I'm gonna need you to stop doing that, Bryce, because it's making me concerned. Very, very concerned. Now I want to kind of talk about the stakes in this book. I have a really big thing for high stakes, and I feel like the beginning of this book had very, very low stakes after the Danica murder. I feel like everything after that was very low stakes, because the majority of the people in this book, the characters that we focus on, have already made the drop, so they are essentially immortal. If stuff gets chopped off, they can grow it back. Hunt's wings get chopped off, for example, and I was like, well, don't really care, because they're gonna grow back. I feel like I should have cared at that point in time, but I was like, well, that's gonna hurt, but also it's not really like an eternal punishment. Like, if he didn't grow back and somebody decided to chop his wings off, that is like a fully traumatizing thing to happen forever. But I find the stakes of being injured less than the stakes of potentially being dead or having something that you cannot change happen to you. It kind of removed a little bit of the fear from me. I like to live in the fear in this sense, and I think that's why I like the last 200 pages of this book so much, because what it did was it put all of the power players, all of these people that have made the drop, have this massive amount of power, it put them all in the same place and made them watch TV, while Bryce, who is in danger, has to do all the stuff. And the whole time you sit there and you're like, fuck, Bryce could die. And that's when I care, because something irrevocable could happen at this point. And I mean, I knew she wasn't going to die, but at the same time you're like, literally anything could happen. If she gets her arm chopped off, her arm's not coming back. You know, it just had a lot more stakes to it, and I'm going on about stakes, but I just really think that it makes a huge impact in a book. I also loved the fact that all of the people in the summit just had to watch. It really added to the helplessness that everyone's feeling, because you are sort of, as the reader, in the same position, and you can't help. You just have to sit there and watch what happens and watch what Bryce does. And also I love Hypaxia. I haven't said that. Hypaxia is the newly crowned witch queen, and I really like her. From all the interactions that we've seen, I feel like she is a very fair person. I feel like she is thinking about the good of everyone and not just like the good of her little section of Lunathian. Now we'll go back to the stuff that they're actually watching. So the Micah scene where he came in and villain monologued, I just really didn't understand. I mean, he didn't know that the cameras were there, obviously, but still, why are you villain monologuing? Just do it. You're way more powerful than this half-human, half-fake girl. Just do it. Why do you need to tell her all of the things that you did? Like, it's such a problem, and I feel like it was very, let me just twirl my mustache while I tell you my villainous plans, and it's like, no, stop. Just get on with it. Like, I don't understand villains that are just sat there saying, here's my plan, let me tell you all the details, I need to tell you every single thing that I did because it will like mess with your mind. No, just get on with it and kill her. Why do you care? You want her dead. You want to scrape off the horn from her back because you think that's going to work for some reason. Why did he think that was going to work? So weird. Anyway, as if this wasn't enough to make me dislike the man, he threw Syrinx into the Nox enclosure. What a dick. I mean, you can mess with the people all you want, but do not mess with the animals. I was like, my face was a picture, shall we say. It was a picture of fuck that guy. I really enjoyed that little section with the Nock because, again, Syrinx could die. Syrinx is an animal. We've had the Nock described as like it wants to kill everybody and eat everybody, so it had stakes. Again, I love the stakes. But I really like to see how Bryce interacted with the Nock. And then there was a whole Le Harbour section. Now, I liked Le Harbour. She came across as nice and I liked her, but I didn't really love her up until the point where she was like, I'm gonna save you now. And the way that she saved each other while saying that her friends were with her, I was like, it upset me so much. It was so emotional. So I love that bit because it was so emotional, it made me feel things, and I'm like, good. I think this is what I've been missing from the earlier parts of this book. Because I almost didn't know Danica well enough to actually feel anything when it happened. I feel like her murder happened too early, and then nobody else that you care about really has anything that happens to them except for like people constantly being awful to Bryce for no reason. But the way Bryce killed Micah and hoovered him up, I will never be able to hoover again without visualizing Bryce hoovering that angel up, because that was so good. That was the moment that cemented Bryce as oh my god, this character is amazing. I absolutely adore her. She literally left no crumbs. She hooved them all up. Best. I don't have anything else to say about that situation because it was just so badass and I loved it. I also loved the way that she ran to help the defenseless using Danica's sword, and the way that the wolves came to support her and they were like, we're here, we're going to help you defend the defenseless, and it was very emotional. And then the bit with Danica and the drop, honestly, there's that sound on TikTok that's like the sound of Danica saying light it up, light it up, light it up, and I'm like, tears. I'm never going to be able to watch it again. Every time that comes up I'm going to be like, scroll please, I can't be traumatized again. It was so good. I'm getting emotional talking about it, so I won't talk about it a lot, but I feel like it was a really cathartic moment, especially for Bryce, but also for the reader, because you spend the whole time not really getting to interact with Danica. You're seeing her through other people's perspectives and other people who were trying to mislead you about what Danica was like and the secrets that she kept hidden. So it was really nice to have that moment where Bryce realised that Danica was always going to be with her, and she was there with her when she needed her the most, and it's very emotional and I liked it a lot. I also really liked when Bryce made the drop and she healed everything. She like closed all the gates and rebuilt the city and fixed Hunt and all that, and I know that it kind of is like she retconned everything that just happened, but I kind of like that because it showed us the power of the Asteri, and they just sort of how little they cared about anything that happened. They didn't care if they killed civilians, they didn't care if they bombed the city, they're just like, cool, we'll just mop up the mess. Don't really care, it's easier if there's destruction, blah, blah. So I really like that, and I feel like a bunch of people still died, so the city is still going to feel it, the city is still going to be changed, but it's just easier as a starting point for what's going to happen next. So I didn't mind that it kind of retconned the destruction that happened but like I could see how some people might mind that. Let's go back to Hunt and the fact that Hypaxia released him from his sort of power bondage, and I really like that. I thought it was really nice to see him actually get to use his lightning power. They keep saying how individual he was, but we didn't really get to see him do much lightning stuff, and then at the end he was like there. So that was good. And then the Asteri freed him in exchange for complete silence then, like, don't do anything, we'll leave you alone and we'll give you this man if nobody does anything anymore. And I feel like the interesting thing is that the price of freedom and Hunt's freedom from slavery is to just do nothing, to just fade into the background and don't bother anyone, maintain the status quo, because I just can't see that happening. There is no way that Hunt and Bryce are gonna just fade into the background and not do anything. They're just not that kind of people. So I think the Asteri are a little bit misled, and they probably should have held on to Hunt, because that was a really dumb idea of theirs to think that they could convince Bryce to just not do anything. It's not gonna happen. So I think one of the last things that I wanted to comment on was the interesting discussions around rebellion and loyalty and fanaticism, because that is a big theme throughout. That we had this previous rebellion that Hunt was involved in, and he had this sort of blind loyalty to the woman that he loved, and that is why he ended up in the position that he's in. And there's this comparison to this human rebellion that this guy was trying to start, the one that was blamed for Danica's murder, who didn't actually do it. And I just thought it was interesting to see Hunt evaluate his priorities and his previous actions and sort of think, would I have done this again? Or like, would I have done this without this person leading me into this? So I feel like lots more rebellion stuff has got to come into play into House of Sky and Breath. I don't know anything about House of Sky and Breath except for a spoiler at the very end, but that's because no one can keep their mouth shut. On TikTok, on Instagram, on Twitter, the author and the publisher just posting spoilers all around, so I know that spoiler, but that's the only thing that I know about House of Sky and Breath, so I'm really interested to go into this one not knowing anything. I had a few spoilers for this one before I started it, so maybe that did impact how I felt about certain things, but I still really liked it. It's really good. So anyway, yeah, those were my thoughts on House of Earth and Blood. I had a lot of them. I really did enjoy this book, and I feel like there's a lot of rereadability in this one, so I can't wait to reread it at a later point. I'm very, very excited to pick up House of Sky and Breath. I'm going to be doing that after a reread of A Court of Silver Flames, because technically you're supposed to read that one between the two books, so I'm going to be doing that, but I'm going to read it in the next week. Please don't spoil me for anything, because I would be really sad about that, but I'm really glad that I left reading this book until like a week before the third book in the series comes out, because I just feel like this hype and the excitement I have around it is just really a nice place to be. I haven't been in this place for a while in BookTube, and it's quite exciting to be here amongst the hype and everybody else in the hype too. So I'm enjoying this very much, and I hope you enjoyed this book talk, which is just a chaotic mess of me talking about things about this book. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!